First is the Canadian Council for Refugees, Debbie Hill-Corrigan. 8 minutes, Debbie.
I can guarantee it'll be less. Thank you very much. I'm here tonight representing the Canadian Council for Refugees, but I also wear another hat, and that is as the Executive Director of Sojourn House, probably the largest refugee shelter in Toronto, maybe even in Canada, that provides shelter and support and also transitional supportive housing for refugees. So I also bring very much a frontline perspective of hearing people's stories and knowing that some of the people that we have in Sojourn House today under the new legislation may not be accepted. So on that note, I will present now, as I was requested, for the CCR. And for those of you who don't know or are not familiar with the Canadian Council for Refugees, it's been around for over 30 years. The Canadian Council for Refugees represents across Canada, it's our national umbrella organization, represents upwards of probably about 140 direct service faith communities, all people who walk with refugees on a day-to-day basis, as well as academic institutions who are also members of the CCR. And I would just put a plug in for the CCR, hope that those of you who after tonight would seriously consider, if you're with an organization, to become a member and to support the CCR in the advocacy work that we do to ensure fair policies and legislation that protect refugees. As Canadians, it's our responsibility to continue to ensure that we are a welcoming and respectful country that welcomes newcomers to our shores. There is general agreement from the CCR that a good refugee determination system is one that fairly and quickly determines who needs refugee protection. How far do the proposals presented by the government meet that goal? The Canadian Council for Refugees believes that there are some positive elements, but also several serious flaws that would put refugees, particularly the most vulnerable, at risk of being deported to persecution. And I won't go into detail because my colleagues, who are also members of the Canadian Council for Refugees, will be presenting in more detail on those particular issues. The primary concern, however, must be the need to respect refugee claimants' human rights. People's lives are at stake. I see it every day at Sojourn House. We talk to people, we hear their stories, and we know that many of them would potentially, if they were coming after the legislation, fall through the cracks. In particular, women who have been victims of gender violence, the LGBTQ communities, people who are coming based on cases based on sexual orientation, that there are the very short time frames that are being proposed in this will not allow enough time for people to present their issues. It takes weeks, months for people to come to trust someone to be able to tell their story. And this is a very serious concern that we have. And that will be dealt with, as I say, in a bit more detail by my colleagues. Key proposed changes in the system combine to greatly increase the chances of vulnerable refugees being denied protection. Take the case of a woman victim of sexual violence in a designated country, which is also an issue we'll be speaking about. She is interviewed and then rushed to a hearing before she is ready to testify frankly about her experiences and before adequate documentation about the situation of abused women in that country can even be collected. The case is decided by a civil servant who is aware that the government considers claims from this country to be unfounded. Once rejected, no appeal is available to review whether an error was made or to hear new evidence received after the hearing that confirms her fears of persecution. She is also barred from applying for humanitarian and compassionate consideration for a year following the rejection of her claim. And just to close, I'm just going to say what, from the CCR's perspective, a checklist for good refugee determination. So take notes. Accept that refugee determination is difficult. It is rarely obvious who is a refugee. Assess each case on its individual merits. Invest in high-quality initial decisions. Get it right the first time. Keep it non-political. Have an independent body make all decisions. Keep things simple. Avoid unnecessary rules. Put the necessary resources in place, avoid backlogs. Well, actually, I'd like to see that, but remember that human lives are at stake. Adhere to human rights standards. And Canada is a signee to the Convention of Human Rights, and I believe that this legislation must reflect that we are honoring those obligations. Thank you.